Hey guys, back with another video. This time not a gaming related video, another film related video. I've done a few videos talking about movies. I don't know. I thought I was kind of in the mood to do another one. But this one's about documentaries. I'm just gonna talk about some of my favorite documentaries, which it's interesting. This past year, I'd say, in fact, this entire year, I haven't watched too many movies. In fact, I've been mostly watching documentaries for some reason. And documentaries are a recent thing for me. Growing up, I didn't watch too many. I think they're the kind of thing that I think appreciate and more the more you get into them, the more you get older. I feel because when I was young, I didn't really care about them, but I think there's a lot of great ones out there. A lot of them are really fascinating. So I thought I'd talk about some of my favorites. I'm gonna try not to spoil a lot of these because I feel a lot of documentaries. It's good to know the general idea of the documentary and what it's about, but that's it. Because a lot of them can be very shocking if you're not knowing what to expect. So I'm not. There's a couple here that I'm not going to go into super detail on, and this video is probably going to be pretty short. These are just a couple documentaries that I'll recommend. And definitely give me some suggestions. I'm always looking for some new documentaries. But yeah, I don't know. I found like this year in terms of actual movies, there really hasn't been much that's interested me. I recently saw Kingsman: The Secret Service, and I really enjoyed that. But other than that, there just hasn't been much that's really captured my interest. I don't know, maybe later in the year, but I know the big movie right now is the new Avengers movie. I have no interest in that whatsoever. I didn't even see the first Avengers movie. Like that's one of the highest grossing movies of all time, and I didn't watch it, nor do I really plan on watching it. But anyways, let's get right into things with this first documentary, which is the one I'm gonna talk about the least, just because it's one of those things. It's one of those documentaries I really would not want to spoil people on. It's called Dear Zachary, and it's on Netflix, on the U.S. Netflix at least. So I know a lot of people have Netflix, but if you have Netflix, which most people watching this video probably do, it's on there, and it's fantastic. And I don't really want to say much about it. It's basically a true crime documentary, but it's very emotional, very shocking. It really. And it's really angering too, I gotta say, and it kind of hits a bit. It kind of hits a bit close to home for me in some ways. I really don't want to spoil much on this. And try not to look up too much on this. Don't read comments or anything like that because this is one of those documentaries that if you get spoiled to some of the events, I don't think it will be as interesting. Well, not really interesting. It's one of those. Even if you do know the events, I think it is still pretty important to watch this one. But yeah, I don't want to say too much on it. It's probably the only documentary in this list that I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with because yeah, it's a doozy. So yeah, definitely highly recommend that. And luckily, you can easily access that on Netflix. All right, the next documentary is called Maximaculpa, Silence in the House of God. And this is a documentary from Alex Gibney. He's a documentary filmmaker. He's done a lot of documentaries, a lot of really great ones. I highly recommend pretty much all of his films. Like recently he did Going Clear, which was a documentary on Scientology, and that's a crazy documentary. I definitely highly recommend that one. Another one he did that I really liked was Enron, The Smartest Guys in the Room. What a disaster that was. A very, very fascinating documentary. But out of all the ones I've seen from him, this is the one that stuck with me the most. It's basically about abuse of power in the Catholic Church. And I think it was like this takes place in like the 60s where it's kind of about like a giant cover-up basically throughout the Catholic Church that even goes up as high as the Vatican, where these four deaf men were sexually abused by a priest in the 60s. And I'm not going to lie, this is a very rough documentary. It's hard to watch, it's uncomfortable, it's depressing, infuriating. And I think it hits a bit close to home because I grew up, I was raised Catholic. I went to a Catholic high school. Went to a Catholic church. I'm not religious anymore, although I was baptized. But I consider myself an atheist now, but this is something I grew up with. So it's seeing it just made me even more angry. And this documentary is definitely going to make people angry. It's it's again, it's hard to watch, but it definitely I think it's an important watch. And it's one of those things. It's very frustrating to see, but um, it's very powerful, and again, it stuck with me. Um, so yeah, I definitely highly recommend it. Some people are probably not going to be able to watch it. I understand that, but if it seems like too heavy subject matter, I would definitely recommend some of his others documentaries. The Scientology one is, I think, more of an easy watch, although even that's pretty fucked up, that one. But yeah, this one just has really stuck with me ever since I watched it. The next documentary is actually one that's funny. This is not a super heavy one, although it is pretty sad at times. It's called American Movie, and it's definitely the funniest documentary I have seen. It's about this guy, Mark Borchardt. He lives in Wisconsin. This was done in like the late '90s, where he's trying to get a film made, an independent horror film. I think it was called Coven. He's trying to get this film made, and it's a disaster from day one. Everything that can go wrong seems to go wrong for this guy, and it's a bit heartbreaking to watch. But he's so passionate in what he's doing, and he wants to get this film done so badly that he just perseveres. And really, I think this documentary is about passion in general and perseverance, and it's I don't know, it's thought provoking and it's kind of inspiring at the same time. And as someone that enjoys like the process of filmmaking, I took some. I went to media fundamentals in college, which was kind of a filmmaking class. Not like a super in depth one, but it's as someone that like kind of has that not really background, but is kind of interested in that sort of thing. I thought this movie was very fascinating, because it kind of details the process, but in a really low budget way. And I'm sure, and movies aren't normally done like the way he does it in this movie. But this guy is just really likable, but at the same time, he's kind of hilarious. But he does have his problems. He's almost a borderline alcoholic. He's still living with his parents, and I think he just recently had a divorce, and it's kind of sad. But he's just so determined to get this movie made, and it's really fun to watch. And you'll feel bad for the guy, but at the same time, some of the stuff that goes wrong is just you can't help but laugh at some of this. But yeah, the whole time you're rooting for this guy. You really want him to succeed, and he's quite the character. This guy, like, I don't want to spoil it, but man, he's quite the character. And his friend that kind of helps him along is really interesting too. And you really get to know this guy as a person. It's really just a really well done documentary, really funny, touching, and sad at the same time. I highly recommend it. I think most people would be able to get into this one. In terms of watching it, there is a site that I watched on called Crackle. I think it's like a UK-based site. I forget if I used like a media hint or something to be able to watch it in Canada, but if you go to crackle.com, you can actually find this documentary on there for free. You might have to do some legwork to get it working, but I'm pretty sure you can easily just watch it on there. That's how I watched it, so you can easily access this one. But yeah, I definitely highly recommend this one. Okay, this next documentary is called The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, and this one came out pretty recently on HBO. This is a 6-part documentary series. Each part's, I think, like 45 minutes long. And some of you might already just be spoiled to the events of this documentary. Based on things in this documentary, some news stories came out. Unfortunately, I was spoiled to this particular news story, and it's actually what made me finally go out and watch this. Although I had heard about this series before this happened, but if you don't know the story of Robert Durst, don't look anything up on this guy and just immediately try to watch this documentary. Because this is one of the most insane fucking documentaries I've ever seen. It's, again, I don't want to say too much on it. It's basically your basic true crime investigative kind of documentary. done by Andrew Jarecki, I think his name is. He's done another documentary before, Capturing the Freedmans, which is another good one. That one actually probably one of the most disturbing documentaries I've seen. But this one is just flat out insane. The finale, the sixth episode. Oh my god! Like it probably has one of the best endings to not only a documentary, to a film that I've ever seen. And this Robert Durst. He's like, you really get to know this guy, and he's an interesting character. That's for sure. But you know what? That's honestly all I kind of want to say about it. It's, at first it kind of seems like your typical murder kind of murder mystery-esque documentary, but it gets crazier and crazier. Plenty of twists and turns, and it's really well done. The interviews are all great throughout. It's very angering. It's very sad. It's shocking. Yeah, that's all I want to say. Please, I implore you to seek out this documentary, and even if you are spoiled to some of the events surrounding this documentary, and I should say this documentary takes place over like a multi-year period. Really fascinating stuff. Definitely, please try to track this documentary down. I don't know. Like since it aired on HBO, I don't know. I actually don't know the right way to go about finding it, but yeah, I'm sure you can find it somewhere. But yeah, highly recommended. This next documentary is a fairly famous one. It's called Grizzly Man, done by Werner Herzog, of course, a pretty famous documentary filmmaker and filmmaker in general. And this is probably one of the more heartbreaking and sad documentaries I've seen. But at the same time, it has its message, and that basically is that passion and obsession can it can backfire. It can having too much passion, too much obsession, and just it can go horribly wrong, as it does. I think most people probably know the events around this, and I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say. But basically it's about a guy, Timothy Treadwell, who this guy spent like 13 summers, I think, in Alaska, surrounded by wild bears, grizzly bears, and he felt like he could communicate with them, and that they knew him and they understood him, and the fact that he survived 13 summers alone with these bears, without them attacking him, that to me still kind of blows my mind. But this documentary basically shows a lot of the footage he captured while he was out there alone with these bears. He talks to himself a lot, and you really get to know this guy based on some of his friends and things like that. And yeah, a very interesting guy, but at the same time, based on what he did, it's hard to really, I don't know. He's hateable in a certain way, and I mean, I think it's no surprise he was eventually killed, but he ended up getting someone else killed because of his obsession and basically his obsession, and that is the sad part, I think, of this documentary, and I think that's kind of what makes him sort of hateable in a way. You could tell that he did have some mental issues, but I don't know. I don't want to say too much because it is a fascinating documentary that I think pretty much everyone should see. It is very shocking, and it was one of those documentaries that it did stick with me, and it just, I don't know, it is very depressing and distressing. I felt like shit quite a few days after watching this. But I won't lie, I was glued to the TV watching this, and yeah, all in all, it is just really fascinating. But yeah, I definitely highly recommend it. It is infuriating. It can be funny at times, but it's certainly like a lot of these documentaries I've mentioned. It's a tough watch. But yeah, I think the events, and you pretty much are clued in right at the beginning of the documentary that Timothy Treadwell did eventually die. But yeah, it's definitely, I think, worth a watch. This documentary is famous for a reason. Okay, and lastly, I'm going to talk about my favorite documentary that I've ever seen, and actually it's probably one of the best films I've ever seen, and that is Crumb. And I saw this fairly recently, and it's another one that's on Crackle, as well as American Movie, so you can definitely, please try to check this movie out. This movie blew me the fuck away. It was made in 1994, so it's a bit older, but it's basically about the Crumb family. The Robert Crumb is, I guess, the main focus, and he's a famous underground cartoonist, known for, I think his most popular is Felix the Cat, which, a very kind of perverted. I don't know, I don't know. His comics were known for being very out there, very graphic sexuality, like some really perverted themes. And some of this documentary is definitely hard to watch. Some of his cartoons are, I think a lot of people would consider them extremely tasteless and offensive. But you really, this movie, I think, more than any documentary I've seen, you like these are real people, and you really get to know them, and they're strange people, but I think all of us are strange in our own ways, and there's a lot of tragedy with this film. Growing up, the Crumb, it focuses on Robert Crumb and his two brothers mostly. Growing up, they had a rough childhood, a lot of abuse, and it's very tragic to see how some of them grew up. The one brother, Charles, he's in the documentary. He's like in his 50s, still living with his I think his mom. And it's sad. It's heartbreaking shit. That this movie, just to see where these people have ended up. Robert Crumb obviously ended up becoming famous through his art, and all three of the brothers are exceptional at drawing, and they all started out that way. But again, I don't want to spoil some aspects, but it's one of the more human documentaries I've seen. And I think some people are probably going to dismiss like Robert Crumb as being just offensive, like a misogynist, and things like that. Which, yeah, maybe. He's got a lot of out there opinions, and he's a very I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it's like, this is easily the most fascinating documentary I've ever seen, and it's sad, it's touching, it's the ending. I gotta mention the ending. The ending is honestly one of the most, like, the ending really got to me emotionally. I think it really was kind of unexpected, but at the same time it wasn't. I don't want to spoil it, but. Again, I think even if you're interested in also just cartoons in general, and just how like Robert Crumb got famous and things like that, and kind of see what his art was all about. This is really fascinating in that way too. But to me, the most fascinating thing was just to get a look at this family. It was very, I don't know, it was super in depth. And the director, I think during the time he was making this, like, he was suffering from severe depression. He was making like no money, and he wanted to kill himself like multiple times throughout the filming. And you can almost feel that with the way this is filmed. It just, I don't know. There's something about this film. It's just it just stuck with me, and I've seen it multiple times now. I've got the Criterion Collection edition of the movie. Definitely check that out if you can as well. I don't know. It was one of those. It's, out of all the documentaries I've seen, it's the one that stuck with me the most. And if someone wants to see a documentary, this is always going to be the first one I recommend. Like some of the others, it can be hard to watch at times. It's very disturbing, especially some of his comics. But I know I think it has a lot of interesting themes. It has a lot to say, and it's very thought provoking, fascinating, and a must watch. Alright, guys, so that's it. Those are some of my favorite documentaries. What are some of your favorites? Recommend me some. I'm always up for a new one. Sometimes the subjects aren't going to be super interesting to me. Sometimes I avoid documentaries purely on the subject. And based on some of these, I think you can tell I'm probably more into like the darker, more disturbing documentaries for whatever reason. And some I generally do get a lot really into like the true crime type documentaries, but sometimes you can watch a documentary and the subject might not seem interesting to you at first, but documentaries have that weird effect where you might find them, like, the subject at hand, not that interesting, but once you start watching, they find a way to make it interesting and fascinating. But yeah, that's it, guys. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.